Congressman Andy Ogles is dropping by to give us an update on President Trump's big, beautiful bill being negotiated in the Congress. Jack Posobiec confronted Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin. He joins me to relive the experience. And conflicts are escalating on the border between India and Pakistan. Are these nuclear powers headed for war? OAN's Daniel Baldwin will update us on today's cabinet meeting and so much more. It's all next on the Matt Gaetz Show. Let's do this.
We're shaking up Washington, D.C. We're breaking the fever.
You ever watch this guy on television? He's like a machine. He's great. Matt Gaetz.
President Trump is championing a comprehensive legislative package dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill, aimed at extending his signature tax cuts, enhancing border security, and eliminating taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security benefits. To finance these initiatives, some in the GOP are proposing significant reductions to government spending, targeting programs like Medicaid and foreign aid budgets with potential cuts exceeding $800 billion, and we cheer those cuts on this program. I'm sure there are others who will be just fine increasing the deficit with tax cuts, and that is not the view we should hold. The national debt drives inflation. That's what Bidenomics taught us. Tax cuts must be paid for with spending cuts. Elon Musk and Doge have shown us where to cut. They've given us the roadmap. And brave agency heads like Linda McMahon at the Department of Education are reducing their workforce even without Congress. And so it's time for Congress to have the same zeal for savings and spending cuts that we see in the Trump administration. President Trump's signature legislative achievement during his first term was the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That legislation is set to expire soon, and Trump wants it extended to avoid a tax increase on you.
If our bill doesn't pass, if you don't get it, you're going to have the highest tax increase in history instead of the greatest tax cut in history.
He's right. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act doubled the standard deduction and expanded the child tax credit. According to the Tax Policy Center, households earning between $50,000 and $100,000 saw an average tax cut of around $1,000. Allowing the tax cuts to expire would amount to a stealth tax hike on working-class Americans. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was heralded as a catalyst for the economic expansion during Donald Trump's first term as president, and it delivered. While critics argue it disproportionately benefited corporations and the wealthy, the data presents a far more nuanced reality. If you look at the actual data and the results, it reveals that extending the Trump tax cuts will be essential to maintaining economic momentum, preserving middle-class income gains, and supporting global competitiveness for the United States of America. According to the Tax Foundation, making the Trump tax cuts permanent would boost long-run economic output and add about 850,000 full-time equivalent jobs to our economy. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, real median income households rose to $68,703 in 2019. That's up about $4,379 from just years earlier in 2017. That 6.8% jump in median household income, it coincides directly with the Trump tax cuts. One of President Trump's key achievements was also reducing the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. This reform brought capital back into our country from abroad. Prior to the Trump tax cuts, the U.S. had the highest corporate tax rate in the developed world. That placed American businesses at a structural disadvantage. Post-Trump's reforms, the U.S. rate of 21%, combined with full expensing provisions, sparked a wave of competitive realignment that benefited our nation. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers' 2019 global tax output, about 85% of multinational CFOs said U.S. tax reform made this country, our country, more competitive for capital investment. And so reverting to the rates before Trump's tax cuts would send the opposite signal, that the United States is hostile to business and growth and indifferent to supply chain reshoring. According to the Congressional Budget Office, corporate investment grew by 6.4% in 2018, with a notable surge in capital expenditures, particularly in manufacturing and tech. That's important because a lot of the incentives in Trump's tax cuts made us more productive, more innovative. Now, despite claims of ballooning deficits, individual income tax receipts actually increased post-Trump's tax cuts. The IRS reported in fiscal year 2019 that individual tax revenues were up $85 billion from 2017. So we were on this great trajectory where we weren't having more taxes and higher taxes. We were having lower taxes, but we were having more taxpayers. We were lowering rates and we were broadening America's tax base before being hit by COVID. Data from the U.S. Department of Labor showed that the unemployment rate even reached a 50-year low, 3.5% in early 2020. The tax cuts incentivized businesses to invest and hire, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises that benefited from the 20% qualified business income deduction. That's critically important and has to be extended. And extending the Trump's tax cuts is not just an ideological exercise of the red team versus the blue team. It is economic, rational behavior. These policies spurred wage growth, business investment, repatriation of capital. They enhanced global competitiveness while supporting middle-class tax relief. Rolling back these provisions would risk reversing gains, it would slow the economy and burden American families. Data, economics, not partisanship, demands continuity. Congress must act to preserve the most successful elements of this fiscal policy. As tax policy drives the economic discussion, the deportation of illegal aliens does continue, and House Republicans are pushing an immigration bill to give President Trump broad discretion over asylum, including the ability to increase asylum fees. This continues the important work of securing our border and punishing those who come here without permission. Joining us now is Tennessee Congressman and member of the House Freedom Caucus, Andy Ogles. So, Andy, bring us into these negotiations around the reconciliation legislation. What issues are driving the most unity, and what are the issues that you and your colleagues are still working on?
I mean, obviously, the Trump tax cuts, as you've been talking about, are critical as we go forward. But, you know, what I'll say is I'm on Homeland Security and Financial Services. So Homeland Security, we did our work yesterday. We got our portion of the reconciliation out. I'm currently in committee, so I stepped aside for a moment. So we're on like hour 7.5, and the Democrats are still offering amendments, trying to slow this down, trying to be obstructionist. Because look, the facts are the facts. Trump had the most successful economy in recent history. Obviously, COVID happened, and obviously, so that's a blip in the data. But as we go forward, when you look at the tariffs, when you look at all the things that are happening, we're going to be better off tomorrow than we are under Joe Biden because of the strength of President Donald Trump. And look, I was remember a handful of Republicans that were chosen to go overseas, met with members of the European Parliament. And what I can tell you is Europe loves America. Europe wants a strong relationship with the United States of America. They want a trade deal with the United States of America. So what you have to do is let this play out. As we were leaving to depart for Europe, Japan was landing on the ground to negotiate a new tariff deal, or a trade deal. So as we go forward, you got to understand that Trump has a short window to get a lot done to fix the economy that Joe Biden broke, to fix the economy, quite frankly, that COVID broke. And as we go forward, we're going to be a better, stronger, more respected America because of President Donald Trump.
Congressman Ogles, the tax cuts are key to a lot of the economic agenda. Are people in Congress now talking about just a date to extend them to, or making them permanent?
You know, so we're working on making them permanent, and along the way, we're looking for other cuts in the budget. So right now, financial services, we're trying to cut, tons of money. We'll see what we ultimately come up with. But that being said, is we want it permanent because that'll send signals to the market, to investors, to corporations, to reshore and nearshore corporations, meaning they're bringing jobs, they're bringing manufacturing back to the United States, back to North America. And look, we saw it during COVID. Do you trust the supply chain from China? We saw during COVID the restriction of supply chains and what it did to our country and what it did to our shelves at the grocery store. We need to begin the process of decoupling from China. We need to recognize that they are our enemy. And this is what President Donald Trump is doing by invigorating our economy, by making these tax cuts permanent. And like you said, creating more taxpayers who are contributing to the economy as we continue to grow and be successful.
So, Congressman, you're there right now in a markup with the Financial Services Committee. President Trump, in his speech last night in Michigan, seemed to be leaving the door open for Democrats to come onto these bills, to support them. Do you have any hope that in the House or in the Senate, some good-thinking Democrats might join with you and get this stuff to President Trump's desk?
Well, I'm not going to go that far. It'd be like finding a unicorn under a rainbow. But maybe you might have a few Democrats in these battleground swing districts that realize that, really vote common sense, vote for the people of America. Look, we all know that President Donald Trump had the most successful economy until COVID happened. That's undeniable. We've got to get back to that. We've got to get back to those policies. And quite frankly, we've got to level the playing field. So what a lot of people don't realize is when you go to Europe, when you go to other countries, they single out American products and ban them from their countries. They raise the tariff so high that you, as a small business owner, can't sell into some of these countries in Europe and in Asia, et cetera. That's what President Trump is trying to fix. And look, when you look back historically, look, tariffs should be used strategically, not a blunt force instrument. But what Donald Trump has done is brought over 75 countries to the negotiating table to negotiate new trade deals, which is in your interest, which is in our interest, which is in the interest of our grandchildren.
So final question for you. Democrats seem to be really focused on re-importing MS-13 alleged gang member Kilmar Garcia to the United States. You're on Homeland Security. It's so strange to watch this happen. Are there good policies that are going to come out of the reconciliation bill on Homeland Security that will further deter these type of people from coming in the first place?
Oh, sure. That was one of our priorities in Homeland Security, was securing the border, funding our agents down there, funding the installation and building of more fence. And like, they talk about the dad, right? They failed to mention that he was a gang member, that he was a MS-13 gang member, that he was a criminal. And so, again, you can't listen to the media. You have to read the facts. And what we're doing in Homeland and Financial Services and making our economy stronger. And with Homeland, we're making our borders secure. We've got over 15 million people here illegally. We've got to address that issue. It's the elephant in the room. But those individuals, if you came into this country illegally, you're a criminal. If I go to Germany and I'm there illegally, I'm a criminal. If I go to the United Arab Emirates illegally, I'm a criminal. They're going to deport me. And we have the right. This is our country. We get to decide who comes in. We also get to decide who has to leave.
Congressman Andy Ogles, one of the very best fighting for you on Capitol Hill. Go ahead and get back to, I know how those long markups can go, and so I hope you've got some good caffeine to keep you going through the night, my friend.
Lots of caffeine. God bless.
Take care.